Wow, my first conference with a live band. Woohoo! Woo! I'm pretty excited. Let's do some quick introductions. I'm Adam Lesser. I'm the clean tech analyst at Gigaom Research. Many of you are probably familiar with the news side of the blog, which gets about 6 million more unique visitors. We have a research division where I cover clean tech, and you may think about things like solar power and batteries, but actually increasingly, clean tech is about efficiency, and efficiency is about the smart home, and all sorts of trends in connectivity and Internet of Things is increasingly what we're focusing on.
So I'm Bharat Vasan. I'm the COO at August Home. We make a smart lock that lets you use your phone as a key to get into your home. Prior to this, I co-founded a startup called Basis, which was acquired by Intel earlier this year.
Jeff Hagins, co-founder and CTO of SmartThings, a company that's focused on the easiest way to turn your home into a smart home and being the open platform for the Internet of Things, meaning that we're trying to create an open ecosystem that supports multi-vendor, multi-protocol, multi-standards, and allowing consumers to have the most choice about the different products they use to create a smart home environment.
Itamar Novick. I'm the Chief Business Officer for Life360. Life360 is the family network. We're all about location and communication with the people that matter most to you in your world. Currently, we're the biggest private social network in the world with over 45 million families. And then we take all the connectivity we have on the family side and merge it into IoT by being sort of the beacon that provides family and location awareness to any connected device out there, whether it's cars, homes, or wearables.
I am Dave Friedman, co-founder and CEO of Ayla Networks. Ayla is providing infrastructure and platform to enable manufacturers to connect their products to the internet and then learn from those through big data.
All right. I wanted to talk a little bit about, just open by talking about why now for the connected home. Home automation, home controls have been kicking around for 2 decades, maybe more. But in the last few years, we've seen some breakout successes in point applications, things like Nest Thermostat, Dropcam. The August Smart Door Lock launched in the second half of this year to a lot of people were waiting for that. Why now? Why do you think we're at an inflection point now in terms of the smart home becoming real?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think it's 3 things. I feel like hardware's gotten a little easier to make. It's not super simple yet. I think consumers really get smartphones. A lot of them use it. That install base has grown, and you can do a lot with that, with another piece of hardware attached. So I feel like that experience has become a lot simpler. I think more broadly, people are finding that if there are particular use cases at home that they can solve, whether it's saving money on energy or getting into their home, and it's a new and different experience, it's a better experience, it's something they can easily understand and kind of gravitate towards.
I think there's a nuance to what you just said, though, which is it's certainly driven by the smartphone revolution, but I think the nuance is that people are now living their lives on their smartphone, right? And they're controlling almost every aspect of their lives from their phone, from entertainment to social to financial, etc. And I think there's for that type of user, there is a cognitive dissonance that occurs when you realize that from your phone you can't as much as know if your front door is locked. Right? You have, that your home literally for most people has no voice. And so while I can check on the status of my bank accounts or, look at the latest tickets I bought on Ticketmaster, I can't tell if the front door's locked. I can't tell if I left the garage door open. And that creates this dissonance where people are like, wow, there's something wrong with that, right? That I want that kind of visibility into the home, which is the most valuable asset that I have for most people, right? And they want that visibility into the home that they have into other aspects of their lives.
Can I push back on you a little bit and just ask this question, which is, when I look at tons of products that enter the smart home, and my criteria typically is it easier to use than the analog equivalent? So for you guys, a lock and key is a very elegant system that has worked well for 1,000 years. Is what you're producing easier? And second, is there a value? Is there a return for the consumer? So a connected thermostat is going to save me energy and cash. A smart lock maybe means that I never have to call a locksmith again. But there are things that is the right way of viewing introducing products in the smart home, or do you think that we're just heading towards a world where everything will be ultimately connected?
I think there are a lot of silly devices being created. I wouldn't argue with that by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
But I think that's fine, right? I think we're in this evolutionary period where a whole lot of devices are going to get created, and the consumer is going to decide whether they really add value or whether they don't, right? And as we look forward 5, 10 years, we're going to see, I think, a world where we've settled in on some core use cases that are savings, right? Saving money, peace of mind, security, and those aren't always the same thing, right? Peace of mind for me is about, if my kids that are in elementary school don't come home by 3:30, and I get a notification telling me that, oh, my daughter's made it home, right? Well, that's a peace of mind use case that's all about a connected device that's on her backpack.
Yeah.
Right?
I hope you use Life 360 because that's some of the things that we do. Automatically alert you when your
Thank you
kids
for the plug.
arrive or
We appreciate it.
home. So thank you for the flag. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's going to be much easier to be a neurotic parent in the next 5 years.
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. Wait until we have
Teenagers
wearables.
will never escape Windows. There's going to be eye beacons, but they won't want to leave their phone behind. They're like, oh my God, I got to get out of this house, but I need to text instead.
Well, David, this is a good question for you because you have broader visibility because you are an IoT platform provider, and so you see everything from security to thermostats. I mean, do you have a perspective on that?
I do. I mean, it's interesting. I think there will be a lot of sucky products made, but it doesn't matter. I think to the point is, and maybe even the first point on the lock, what he was saying is, if the cost to get the first thing out the door to see the reaction is much, much, much lower, then you can just get a lot more things, and everyone will start to copy the successes. So we have a bunch of companies who make thermostats and smoke alarms. Why is that? It's because they saw Nest Protect and Nest and like, okay, I need that, but I don't have Tony Fidel's team. It's that simple. And we tell our investors, look, our business is going to be just like yours. The median deal may not be that interesting, but the average will, because 1 or 2 out of 10 will be really big. But you can't even guess. I mean, let's just say there's large appliance companies who've been talking about this for a long time, but most of the suppliers to them may not have even covered the cost of their airfare in terms of what they've been able to do to date. That's going to start to change, though.
So I think I have a little bit of a different take on the original question that you asked. And clearly there's all those trends that we keep getting reminded of when it comes to IoT. The cloud is there, connecting all the devices. Hardware cost is definitely going down. But I think there's something more, right? Because smart homes have been around for, 20 years. You'd have an installer come to your house, an expert, and they would configure the thing for day in, day out. And you'd have all those different things that you try to sort of tailor to your needs. I think now the world is changing with data, and that's the big difference for me, data. So Nest is the first company that really doubled down and revolutionized that space. You plug the thing into the wall, and guess what? It just works, right? And that's what consumers want. That's what consumers need. They don't, it's not about early adopters. It's not about the tech savvy. It's about the rest of us. It's about going mainstream with, you just have something that works in your house. It works because it has the data. It analyzes day in, day out how you and your family behaves. And then it automates all the things that you really want to do. It automates your life, makes it easier for you and your family to live around the house. It saves you energy, and it's really automation. Automation is now, and that's, I think, what's
It's
needed.
interesting. The most high-volume products may be very mundane. They
Oh,
just
yeah.
happen in the background, and they just are, the filter for your fridge kind of just sends a thing, and you approve it and hit yes, buy it. And a lot of stuff will happen in the background versus gee whiz stuff. So I do hate when my kids leave the lights on, not for the energy, by the way. It's just the fact that I'm the guy who does the light bulb somehow in my family, and no one turns the lights. So I would like to turn the lights off and say, whoops, I'm sorry, you're still in the room. Turn them off next time yourself. I mean, that's actually the gee whiz factor for the lights, just to piss my son off. But it'll be that kind of thing. Just turn off everything, kill switch for the lights downstairs, and go to bed. And
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on that because I think that is important, particularly for product designers, because a lot of the product designers tell me, or the smarter product designers tell me, great, technology is technology you don't notice.
Yeah.
It's not there. And even the Nest team, when they developed that thermostat, the whole idea was that you would never have to do much, and that you would just, and if some of the reasons I believe why some of the home automation has failed in the past is because it required you to do too much, right? It required me to do a lot of programming. analytics and data allows you actually not to do anything. It learns from you, which I think leads me to sort of my next question, which is that I guess for some of the people who don't follow the space, the last 6 months have been sort of a big deal because two of the leading platform and hub makers have been acquired. SmartThings was picked up by Nest. Congratulations, Jeff. Excuse me, Samsung. That would have been a very different relationship. And Revolve was purchased by Nest recently, which is owned by Google. A great point application, whether it's a Nest thermostat, whether it's a smart lock, sort of works almost in the background and makes your life easier. Where do you see all that converging with this need for platforms and hubs to network your 10 or 20 devices in the home to deal with the fact that some devices have a Zigbee chip, some use Wi-Fi, some use Bluetooth? Where do you sort of see that converging in the future?
I think certainly we saw from the very beginning that some of the most interesting use cases were in what we called the space between the devices, right? They were use cases that cut across multiple devices. When I come home, use the August lock to unlock the door, absolutely, but then turn on the lights if it's dark outside, right? Adjust the thermostat, use Life 360 to tell me that I came home, right? And so that's an example of a simple use case that would have cut across Life 360 as a service providing that data, the lock, the lights, and the thermostat, right? And that's a basic what happens when you get home kind of use case, right? And there are these very, pedestrian kind of use cases that everybody does every day, right? You wake up in the morning, you typically leave at some point, you come back, and you go to bed at night, right? So there's at least 4 of those kind of big macro events that happen within the day, and all of those are multi-device scenarios, right? And of course, there are a lot of other little ones potentially that end up being very personal to you, like, I want to watch a movie. It's movie time, right? Well, what does that mean in terms of lighting, in terms of, turning on the television or whatever. So I think, it's the platforms that are going to provide that capability, and ideally do it in a way that is agnostic to the protocols, right? So that I can use a Zigbee light bulb and a Bluetooth connected door lock and a Z-Wave connected thermostat, and it doesn't matter, right? Because at the end of the day, consumers don't care about the protocols, and they shouldn't, right? These things just need to work.
I totally agree with you, Jeff. I think a lot of it is about, I think about what you said as the profiles. The profiles that the family is interested in that, are part of their daily rhythm, their daily cadence. And that I think is the key. And to some extent, and what I'm going to say now is more leaning to the platform side, right? I think now we're sort of celebrating the end devices, right? It's about the devices, it's about the Philips Hue and the Nest thermostat. I think actually for consumers, the platforms might make more of an impact over time, right? Because the platforms are what they're going to interact with. And whether it's this light bulb or the other light bulb might not matter as much as long as it does all those things that, on top of the platform and enables doing that. So, I'm very interested to seeing how that whole thing unfolds and what's going to be sort of driving consumers to buy. Is it going to be the devices or is it going to be the platforms, right?
I think.
I don't think. Go ahead, please.
I was just saying a couple of elephants we haven't talked about that are not in the room maybe, but I'm curious to see what Apple and Google do in the space, right? Because Apple's coming out with HomeKit, and typically the way the guys that own the mobile OSs work is they wait for a little bit. People are building all the stuff, we're stitching stuff together, and they go like, you know what? We're just going to solve that and bake it into the OS, and this is kind of what you do with HealthKit, right? And so I saw that happen in wearables. Curious where they net out on this. And then I think the other half is service providers are doing a lot in home automation. So how do they leverage either the platforms beneath them or something else? Because they are actively in customers' homes today selling services. They have a UI, and they have logical places to slot and bundle the stuff. So I'm curious as to how both of those play in these kind of platform deployments.
Yeah, so you actually read my mind, which is that in the last year, even not even last year, the last 8 months, all of the big consumer IT players, Apple, Samsung, and Google, have all staked claims to the home. Apple rolled out HomeKit, as you said, and then there have been acquisitions. So that is actually my question to you. Right? What do you think they want? What is the value to them of trying to own that relationship?
I think from my perspective, what they'd like to do is to be that stitching layer that stitches all of that entire device and product layer together. There are things that August, for example, owns exclusively. We know, when people go in and out. We know when you send keys, when you revoke keys to people to make your home more secure. We have features like auto unlock, so when you walk up to the door, it automatically opens. Those aren't technically platform level features, but stitching them together with your lights, for example, might be a use case where Apple decides, hey, listen, common protocol, we're going to run that through Apple TV or something else and make that work. That's something that I can see them trying. I don't know if it'll work. They're not always successful with every one of these initiatives, but I can certainly see them trying that.
Yeah. Jeff, I imagine you have some first-hand experience.
A little bit. I think, in terms of where guys like Google are headed, I wish I knew, clearly. It's interesting, though, to see that in the Google case, we start with something like Nest, right, which clearly has had an intention to be a platform from the beginning. That's not a secret, right? Now we're bringing in additional hero devices like Dropcam, right, to expand on that portfolio of devices. I think that's a pattern that you're going to continue to see repeated, because I think even though, like in our case, and even though we're an open platform and we want to support lots of different devices and lots of different standards, it's also important for us, note that we do ship a set of devices in our kit, right, that are ours, and I think we'll continue to do that. Part of the reason is that we want to make sure we can control the user experience and deliver on a really fantastic experience for the end user. And the second that shifts from a device that I have complete control over to something that I just am compatible with, I lose a little bit of that capability to control the end-to-end user experience. And so I think there's a desire to be open on our part, but there's also a desire to make sure that we deliver a best-of-breed experience on a core set of devices. So I think it's ultimately about. I think the way people need to think about this, though, is about the value chain of devices and services for the home, because these platforms, once they're in the home, their scope of influence within the home isn't going to just be limited to automation and connecting up devices. There's more that you can do with an operating system for the home.
And also, right, what you're starting to get at, which is the word data, which is that all these devices are collecting an unprecedented amount of data about us. They know what temperature we like our home. They know where we are at all points, whether we've walked in our home, what room we're in. Part of the whole smart home phenomenon is the decline in sensor prices and connectivity and all those things. One is sort of a privacy question, and the other one is sort of a business model question. But how should that data be handled? And really, when you talk about a platform that can own that relationship, are there not tremendous amounts of business opportunities to try to be built around using that data to improve people's lives?
Absolutely. And it goes to what I just said about other opportunities from a supply chain or a value chain perspective in the home, right? Once you have that data, there's lots of things that you can do with it. I think a few of us up here on stage here for example, have relationships with insurance providers, right? Obviously, that's a market segment that's keenly interested in this data, and for the first time, we're living in a world where we can actually measure, the impact of some of these types of sensors and devices and really quantify without having to have a lot of actuarial work involved, really measure directly the impact of some of these solutions to do things as simple as turning off the water when you have a water leak in your home.
I also want to highlight something that's slightly different that has to do with the company culture you built from the very beginning. A lot of us are building products now that are pretty deep in the home. When you bought a Cisco router 5 years ago, 6 years ago, privacy was a concern, but you really didn't think about Cisco transmitting your data someplace. It just wasn't really that big an issue. But when you talk about access to your home, where your wife and kids are, and it's the most expensive thing you own, it's a different level of trust that you have to inspire. And I feel like any company putting product in the market has to be super conscious about that, not just from a marketing perspective, but live those values internally around, firewalls, securing your data, making sure that stuff is right, not ever transmitting data without the user's consent, making sure the user feels like it's a logical extension of how they treat their home now, and there's no less control that they have over their privacy and their home than before. And I feel like that's important. When Google acquired Nest, that was a big deal for them. Like, hey, this isn't tied to our ad business. This is a product for the home that's insulated.
Yeah, they had a lot of questions about opt-in versus opt-out as soon as that acquisition happened.
And I think that's really a big deal because we're talking about endless troves of data, right? When we're talking about smart homes. And I think, at Life360, for example, we have all this sensitive location data about kids, about families. We actually process 1.5 billion unique location points daily. That is massive amounts of data. And one thing that we're hearing from our users, and the way it really helps us also tie into the smart home, is they don't want to give Google that data, right? So there's a big privacy challenge there that's very, very interesting. And I think from a business point perspective, right? I mean, if I was at the helm of one of those big companies, this is clearly one of the biggest opportunities. Like the next big opportunity after smartphones is this home and IoT opportunity. It's huge. I mean, and technology companies have to innovate or they die. We know how that works, right? So if you're not part of that, big next wave, you're going to be in trouble 5 to 10 years down the line. But tying in the privacy side of it and the security side of it, I think we actually, as people in this industry, we don't talk enough about privacy and security, right? Because there's so much sensitive data, and there's access to so many things in your home that tie into your family, and nobody's doing that. So in my spare time, I'm an angel investor, and I think one of the biggest trends we're going to see in the next few years is security around IoT. How do I make sure that the person that unlocks, my August door lock is actually me and not, who knows, this other guy who just wants to, wipe clean my house? That's a big deal, and I think, this industry is not yet addressing that.
So actually, I just want to differ on that. I feel like the person that sells the product owns that problem. I think it's tough for a company to produce a product, put it in your home, and then say, hey, it's somebody else's problem to secure it. I think it's hard to take that approach.
Sure, I think it's a true statement, though, that we as an industry are still discovering the best practices for how to deal with IoT data.
Sure.
Right. That is something that we're not done figuring out. Right. Things like when you store customer event data in the cloud, right? You need to natively anonymize the storage of that data so that if you do have a security breach, no one can actually attribute that data to any particular customer, right? For us, that's something that we've done from the beginning. Seems like that's the best practice. It's not really codified anywhere, though, that's something that all IoT companies should do. Or if you do have customer PII somewhere in the cloud, that needs to be encrypted in place, right? Another best practice, but but there's no set of standards yet, right? And I'm not rushing to have anything other than kind of self-regulation here, but that's a set of things that we're figuring out over the last 3 years.
Right, and I think for some of the specific point application providers, their sense of how seriously they take it and how much they invest is very commensurate to what can go wrong with their product. People involved in security and smart locks that I've spoken with are very, very on top of this because the risk is so massive that someone hacks into your phone and opens your door, right? So that is super. At the same time, I would say that after thermostat, security is probably the area where I'm most optimistic about growth in the smart home because I think we have reached that point. I actually wanted to ask you about that because we had talked about this like 6 or 9 months ago. Like thermostats have sort of had some success. What's next in the smart home? Security looks very ready. Like people seem very ready to maybe have an alternative. I think Apple Pay is increasing the belief that people want to go for a run and not bring their keys or their wallet or anything with them. What are you seeing?
I guess we would, this kind of takes a lot of this stuff that's talked. There will be a My Home app and a My Health app. Now this gets a little bit with Google, everyone, Samsung, all guys want to control eyeballs. That's really what they're trying to do. And if you think of those two areas of My Home, My Health, that's actually, at least in the consumer space, the products that you're seeing. So it is lots of HVAC and air conditioners and door locks and light switches and so on. And you don't want an app for all of them. You want one app. So that's what these big guys are trying to solve. Or a startup will raise $100 million to have the My Home app. It's really that simple. Or the service providers now see Apple as a huge competitor, or Samsung. They say, okay, well, I want to control the eyeballs of my 50 million households, and these guys say, well, I want to. You're Samsung now, you guys, big bully. And now, so that's driving it, but then there'll things, we have a customer called Outlet, and it's just cool and awesome, and it's a little baby sock that's the vital signs to a phone, and then there will be blood pressure cuffs, and there's a lot of aging in place, keeping people out of hospitals and using eye beacons. If you just take those two areas, My Home and My Health, that's where we see lots of designs in play today that are kind of aiming towards, they'll all have their own app, but really they shouldn't all have their own app. That app should also connect into this app and this app, and we do have guys doing HomeKit stuff and so on as well.
I want to make a pitch for how standards are going to help solve this problem too, right? Because we don't yet have the kinds of standards that we need to help solve these problems, right? We started this evolution 3 years ago with Zigbee and Z-Wave, right? Those are not the kinds of standards that are ultimately going to solve the kind of problems that we're going to have here. We're throwing our weight behind things like Thread and the Open Interconnect Consortium as a set of standards that can go from the device all the way to the cloud, ultimately deal with things like cloud-based federation of identity and remote access to devices, and then ultimately, standards for cloud-to-cloud kind of integration, data sharing, et cetera. We're just getting started with those things. And so we're living in this world right now where if I want to talk to the Nest thermostat, I've got to do a point integration with the Nest APIs. And if I want to do a Honeywell integration, I've got to do a totally different integration. And that story gets retold for every single vendor.
But this is why platforms are going to exist. So part on this question of security, if every manufacturer in the world built their own capabilities like Nest, let's count how many amazing security engineers there are out there. And of course, there aren't that many that can solve this uniquely for each guy. So there will be platforms. It's going to happen. Not everyone's going to recreate the wheel. But what I think is going to happen then, Jeff, is that your cloud and my cloud will connect. We're already doing that. I'm working with my competitors because why not? My manufacturers just want Switzerland.
That's right.
They want to be able to connect up to any service provider, to the different retail thing, to whatever, that cool thing that Samsung's doing. And what'll be good, though, is there won't be 50 different cloud providers. There'll be 50 OEMs doing their own thing who are slowly getting pressure to just get into one of these platforms. The platforms will connect, and it'll happen that way. We can see it already.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I didn't mention when we talked about platforms earlier that's a really important aspect of it, which is the separation of intelligence from the devices, and what that means to consumers ultimately in terms of choice. Yeah. I get a little crazy when I see articles in the magazines that show the coffee pot talking to the toaster, right? That's even if you did want to do that, it's just a recipe for building a really expensive coffee pot and a really expensive toaster, and ultimately locking yourself in so that you get a new toaster.
I had a smart home last year.
It was a coffee maker there. The point being that the intelligence, there's a philosophy here that we very much agree with, which is that devices need to be as minimally capable or as minimally intelligent as they need to be to deliver the capability that they deliver, right? And that you should separate as much of the intelligence as you can from the end device so that you can give customers ultimately a choice about which intelligence layer you want to use, which application do you want to use with those devices, but also so that you can manufacture a cheaper device, right? And when you look at something like the history, and I won't just pick on Nest, but the history of the whole smart thermostat, right, or the programmable thermostat. Well, it all makes sense because you had to build the intelligence into the thermostat because we didn't have the technology to be able to separate it from a networking perspective, from a cloud perspective. But ultimately, you get to the point where you have to start to question like, why do I want a $250 thermostat, right? When all a thermostat does at the end of the day is, put voltage on 4 different wires, right? It should be a $10 device, not a $250 device. Why is it so expensive? Because it's beautiful. Can't argue with that, right? But the real reason is because they've built so much intelligence into the device itself.
But,
right?
Very quickly, if you look at the history of the internet-connected stuff before 2010, 99.9 had Linux or some big OS. So I think as they do this, it just allowed them to move really fast versus an 8-bit microcontroller.
Okay, I'm calling the standards conversation. You said 8-bit microcontroller, it's over.
Cheap
We've
stuff.
got 10 minutes left, and I think this is a thought leader panel. And I think what would be very important is to hear from each of you what you think the smart home will look in the next 3 to 5 years. Like if we're standing here in 2018, 2019, what will be different from today, and what should these people know in that evolution? And maybe let's start with Itamar.
So I think one interesting thing that we're not talking about a whole lot is that part of what's happening now is that home security, a huge industry, is actually becoming a subset of home automation, right? And that's happening now. And one question, I think I asked you that before we went on stage is, what is the biggest smart home, automated home platform today in the world? Well, it's actually ADT. Yeah. ADT is the biggest smart home automation platform in the world. They've got over 1 million subscribers that have the platform in there. Not all consumers have the devices, the end devices to work with it, but they're getting there. So it's really interesting to see how those two worlds collide. Now, another thing that I think you'll see is more along the lines of what Jeff said, is the connectivity between all those devices. So one thing that we're working on now at Life 360, which is really exciting, we've got partners on the car side, and we've got partners on the home side, like ADT. So how can your car automatically communicate with your house and sort of automate your life around that? You drive back home, we know your ETA, we know when you're coming back. We start prepping the house for you before you come in, right? Thermostats start heating up. You get closer to home, garage door opens. Before, you don't need to press the button. It's gonna open up for you. It knows you're there, right? Opens up for you, you drive in, you drive into your garage, and the entire house gets ready for you. And it's all because your car and your home, and who knows, maybe your wearable and your kid's wearable are all communicating with each other. So I'm not saying that's gonna happen in the next year. It might take a little bit more, but 5 years from now, I definitely see that as part of our connected home IoT future.
So we may not even be talking about the connected home, because the connected home in some respects is an artificial barrier. We'll be talking about integration between a connected car, security, your office, your home.
I mean, we use the term intelligent living, right? It's really going to go well beyond the home and cover every aspect of your life with connected devices that are on your body, in the car, in the home, at your place of work, being able to integrate all that into one experience. I think in terms of, when I look 3 to 5 years out, number one, mass adoption. Right? Everybody, this will be mainstream, and that doesn't mean that everybody has a platform like ours in their home, but it does mean that most consumers 3 to 5 years from now are going to have at least one and probably several examples of connected devices that are automating things like the August smart lock in their home, right? And it's going to be kind of much better understood and accepted with respect to what the potential is here for what kinds of problems you can solve. I think we're still very much living in a world where our biggest challenge is actually ignorance on the part of the mainstream consumer about what's possible today, right? That's what gets solved in the next 3 to 5 years, such that 3 years from now, that we've pushed through that learning curve for mainstream consumers, and everybody has at least a couple of examples of this in their homes.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. I feel like 3 to 5 years from now, I really hope there's some really compelling use cases that emerge that are not kind of want-based. It would be cool if my toaster talked to my oven or whatever it is. But there's some compelling use cases around making how people live their lives a lot easier. So not Airbnb hosts not having to give out keys, or knowing when your dog walker comes. So just making regular life simple so that stuff gets out of the way, and it gets to be less friction than you have right now with the analog equivalent. I think until we meet that bar, there's just too many dependencies around, like, hey, if you have to have this, you got to have like 4 other things, and then that ecosystem will exist. I feel like you got to have like a couple of really big use cases where like, wow, you know, with smartphones it was, wow, I can browse the web and I can make calls. You need a couple of those big use cases to come together, and I feel like that grows the business.
I agree. I think the devices that add complexity rather than take it away won't be here in 3 to 4 years. And then the ones that do solve a genuine problem, like with smart locks, being able to have a guest and not have to make a key for them, just being able to send them an invite on their phone, things like that, which have real value, I think will still be here. Jeff, do you have a...
Yeah, I think there's a battle among the biggest companies for owning eyeballs. It's already happening in China. I mean, the big guys are focused on IoT. These are the internet companies. And the same thing will happen in the United States. So there will be this move towards one app, and device manufacturers will be pressured to make sure that their consumers have a choice. I think what we'll find on the cost side is that it'll be almost break even for manufacturers because they'll learn from the data actually how to make a better product. So it'll just be there. It'll be there. You'll start to expect, why wouldn't that thing have the connectivity? And it'll kind of seem weird in 3 to 5 years, maybe 5 years by then. And the clouds will talk together. There will be a much more, so right now as a platform, probably for you, your biggest competitor is in-house. That's just going to go away. It's going to be like, I don't use my own sales tools today. I don't go to my board and say, I want to replace Salesforce and spend $500,000 to build sales tools. Same thing, people will not say, I'm going to build my own in-house thing. And because of that, the companies will focus on industrial design. It'll be so nice when companies, Nest did that. It's a perfect product because it's so beautiful. So instead of a gray rectangle thing that you just do, companies will start to focus on differentiation that way. It'll be kind of neat.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it boils down to also there'll be a little bit of a consumer behavior shift that's more widespread, which is, I think, very basically, I think when you take your phone out of your pocket and you do all the things you typically do right now, whether it's checking your email, one of those things you do will be to check on your home. To some extent, to have some.
Except you won't do it from your phone. You'll be doing it from your.
You think from your watch.
From your wearable.
That's cool.
It'll be a chip in your head.
Or a chip in your head. I don't know.
Blink
Maybe not
your
in
eye.
five. Maybe not in 5 years.
Glasses.
I already have one, by the way.
We have a few minutes left. I want to go back to you. I know there's obviously a Chinese presence here, and you guys have some visibility on that market. Like, what, in terms of the connected home and IoT, do you see over there?
So the big, interesting thing in China, I think that the companies here are a little behind on is Xiaomi was nowhere in 2010, and it's the rise of hardware in a way. And so they've come from nowhere to be this massive presence of hardware and software and services. So the big guys, whether it's JD, it's a BAD, Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent are saying, I got to be in that space. I don't want to, I think at Tencent, they were big in the PC, but then mobile happened. Now then they got WeChat, thankfully. But the thing is, each guy, it's a double down requirement to have a major presence in the next evolution of the internet. And I see that happening, and they are really, it is hyper-aggressive internet market there, and it'll come over here too.
I'm curious for like one final round question. You alluded to healthcare and home telemonitoring. I particularly believe that we're going to see a lot more of that, particularly as healthcare costs rise and they become solutions to keep people out of doctors' offices. If you think about the home and maybe even beyond the home, what point applications are you guys most optimistic about? Obviously security and whatnot, but what do you think we'll see in the home? Not just thermostats or lighting, but also maybe things like heart rate monitors. What sort of stuff do you think?
Very quickly, it'll be the use of iBeacons or going from location I'm in the home to exactly where am I in the home for aging in place. Keep people out of hospitals longer. Using the data to say, look, there's a pattern that's not happening. That's an alert.
I'm super excited about computer vision and using video to help solve some of these problems, right? We're putting sensors on things today that that the human eyeball doesn't need a sensor to know, right? I can look at a door or a window and say it's open, it's closed. I can look at a video and say, uh-oh, grandma fell down.
Yeah, but now
right?
the baby's sleeping. That's kind of creepy though. Are you going to protect that?
It's but so I think there's an opportunity for what I hate to say, I don't like to using the term cameras, right?
Yeah.
Because it conjures up all sorts of issues around security and privacy, right? But optical sensors, right?
Not cameras. Not cameras at all.
Not cameras, optical sensors, right? But to use those things on these types of use cases with computer vision algorithms to be able to detect patterns or objects or facial recognition or whatever, to be able to remove some of the other types of sensors that we use today, like a you know, like a passive infrared motion sensor, right? How many people have been in a conference room, you know, at your work, and you're sitting really still, and the lights go out, right? Because passive infrared only works if you're moving, right? We don't actually have today an occupancy sensor that can actually tell me with fidelity whether someone is in the room or not, right? Because they might be asleep, they might, you know, right? But a camera can actually solve that problem. So I think, or sorry, an optical sensor can solve that problem. So I think there's just a huge opportunity over the next few years to leverage that kind of technology here.
I think some of the cool stuff that we're seeing with healthcare and specifically with elder care is that you can actually combine space, so you know the house and the structure, and any kind of data from the person itself, you know, from the older person, and combine them together to do something way more than just I've fallen and I can't get up. You can actually do that to have preventive measures in place. For example, if grandma took, you know, 20 seconds instead of 10 seconds to walk from the living room to the refrigerator, well, that's an indication that, you know, guys, something is wrong, and we need to know about it before she falls. And I think that's big. And it goes back again to the data, and combining that data in the cloud and processing it in a secure and safe way, and then driving insights out of it. And I think that's the future there with healthcare.
Thank you. Bharat?
Well, I'm biased, you know,
Yeah.
I make locks, so it sounds strange, but I'm excited about access to the home. You know, there's so many problems around, is the door open, close, that type of stuff to be solved. You know, I look forward to a couple of years from now where you book a room on Airbnb and you go and the home just knows who you are, and it opens up for you, it closes when it's supposed to. And all of that process around moving in and out of spaces, which every single person does many times a day, is seamless. Because most products right now, locks are built to keep people out. It'd be great to change that paradigm and make access management something where it was built to allow people into your home as opposed to keep them out.
I thought maybe you were going to say I could use it to lock my kids in. Keep my teenagers from getting out of the house.
On that note, I think that security is going to be huge over the next couple of years, and particularly it's going to get really easy for parents to spy on their children, and equally difficult to commit a crime in many homes. But anyways, thank you so much for joining me.